So here is a session about data security spotlight. Super nice seeing everyone here. I saw some old friends and new faces, and really glad you can make it to Seattle with us today. All right, my name is Chenji Ding, and I'm a product manager with Selling Partner API. I've been with Amazon and this team for about 4 years. And here's Kevin.
Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Zhang, and I've been with Amazon for over 2 years now. Based out of New York. Happy to be here, and thank you for taking the time to come in.
Cool. And just a reminder that you can submit questions throughout this session in Slido, and we will have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. Cool. Here is today's agenda. And Kevin, do you want to walk us through this?
Yeah. So our agenda today, we're going to cover a few topics. Basically, the initiatives that both sides, Amazon and selling partner developers, yourselves, how do we collaborate to enable a good marketplace experience while balancing customer trust for data security. So just quick statistics here. I know the numbers in red may seem kind of scary or nervous for anyone, especially around security. But in order to address your biggest worries over risk and things keeping you up, we're here to partner with you in collaborating on how you can balance security with the needs of your business. And later on, we're going to be talking about Amazon's acceptable use policy, as well as our data protection policies. These two policies really are the source of truth that will help drive security maturity and also help advance your security standards, safeguards, and controls. Thanks. So you might be wondering, how do we arrive at our AUP, acceptable use policy, and DPP, data protection policy standards? We like to truncate things down to their very base principles, and this trio here, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, cover almost every aspect of security. Basically, any number or incident that you might have thought of from the previous slide around data breaches can stem from one of these areas, namely confidentiality, meaning the unauthorized exposure of data, data leakage, things that should not happen. Integrity, meaning the modification of the data, unauthorized changes, malicious changes, fraudulent changes, and such. And availability, so whether incident or hack can bring your service down, availability is super important, so building scalable solutions and, in this case, maintaining uptime. These three principles are what drives our policies, and we will talk more about that. Essentially, the acceptable use policy, it's exactly what it sounds like. Don't misrepresent what your application will do with customer data, and only perform activities that sellers have authorized you to do. Our data protection policy covers more technical areas, ranging from the receipt, storage, transfer, and processing of any of the customer data you've obtained through Amazon APIs. This collection of requirements is driven through various industry standards. I won't go through all of them. You might be familiar with NIST, ISO, PCI, basically a huge alphabet soup of security standards. But as you can see outlined here, our general security requirements consist of 8, which apply for everyone. And then we have an additional more stringent 7 that apply for getting access or personnel with access to personally identifiable information, PII. Our next topic is going to be working through a little bit of the collaborative workflow that we have around audits, and Chenji will cover this.
Yeah, just by a quick show of hands, how many of you have been audited before through our partner Deloitte? Okay, so quite a lot. So I guess it's a familiar concept to a lot of you. So by agreeing to our policy, data protection policy and acceptable use policy, you kind of also agreed to our right to kind of assess your compliance with the policies. So start about 2019, we partnered with a third-party vendor, Deloitte, to assess our developers' security controls and data use against those two policies. And we select developers based on a set of criteria, and those are like moving targets and based on your, for example, API role or your usage. So it changes over time. And developers were selected for an audit in a specific year. They would follow a list of steps here to complete an audit with Deloitte. And the process was manual. And it starts with developers filling out a data request list from Deloitte. It's like a questionnaire. And then they meet with Deloitte for about 2 to 3 hours on a call where they share, they walk through a live demo of their solution, their architect, their cloud environment, et cetera. And then a couple weeks later, they would receive a findings report from Deloitte, which highlights, all the gaps or violations they have. And then they enter the remediation stage where, they're required to follow a timeline to remediate all the findings based on the severity of the finding. So in total, that process takes about, a couple weeks to 6 to 8 weeks to complete. And we understand, the audit itself is a very important process for us to work with you to raise the bar for protecting customer data, and we're in this together. And we see this as a great opportunity for us to support you and also kind of providing recommendations and solutions to you to help advance your security maturity. And with that said, we also acknowledge that, a security audit or a scan is not a guarantee of like vulnerability-free environment, right? And it's just point in time, it's the best effort to kind of find out the risk and mitigate them within constraint of time, expertise, and cost, and et cetera. And ultimately, we relied on each and every one of you to be security-minded and to work with us together to up-level the security standard so that we can together protect data better. And with that said, I think we've been getting feedback from our customers and you guys saying although you understand the value of audit and you totally kind of on board with the need for doing that, you wish for a better and simplified and more streamlined process, more automated kind of solution to do the assessment. So we heard that feedback and we really, really took it seriously. So about 2 years ago, we started building this product in-house called Guard. And we want to use Guard to automate a lot of the security assessments that was manual before to help make everyone's life easier. And so Guard is a command line application that's built on top of a series of AWS security services like Macie, Guard Duty Inspector, Security Hub. And we have custom scan rules built in Guard to scan your AWS environment and look for security gaps against the data protection policy and acceptable use policy. So many of you might say, I already use Macie today. I already use Guard Duty today. Why do I have to use Guard on top of that? The thing is, Guard has the custom scan rule that's very specifically checked for things against the DPP and AUP. So like, to apply to your SP API usage, it doesn't have to be, anything specific in your AWS account itself. It's more kind of against our policy. And Guard returns a findings report exactly 24 hours after the scan is complete. So it's much faster. You waited much less time to get that findings report so you can take actions immediately. So this is what Guard covers today. In the first column, you will see those are the AWS services that Guard currently integrates with. And the middle column is the scan rules that I was talking about. And the last one is all the security controls in today's Deloitte audit framework. So if you have gone through a Deloitte audit, you're familiar with those things, right? Those are the domains, the controls you have to answer questions about. And so by having launched Guard, we're now offering about 30% reduction in the manual audit. So for example, this year, for all the developers who are in audit program, we say if you run a Guard scan and submit a report, you can opt out 30% of the security controls. And that saves a lot of time and money for developers. So Guard completely changed and transformed how we build trust with you all, basically. And in the past, the Deloitte audit is something, we bring to you, we say, hey, developer, let's work on this, let's kind of, make sure you're compliant together. But now you have the ownership and you have the basically freedom to say, this is when I want to run a scan on my account. And I want to do this proactively, whether it's quarterly or biannually, that's all up to you. So we completely reverse kind of the table and put you in a driver's seat to decide when you want to assess your environment. And so first of all, I want to highlight that we provide a transparency on what is assessed and why. You can see everything there. You can see what is scanned. And the data, the underlying data is not shared with Amazon. So like, for example, Macy scans your data storage for unencrypted PII. It may flag a finding saying you have unencrypted PII in your S3 bucket. And we see the finding, you see the finding, but we don't see what is the data. So the underlying data is still confidential to yourself. And all the information, including the findings report, are stored in your S3 bucket automatically. So it's much more secure. Nothing is through email or Excel file, right? And the second thing is Guard is a complete game changer by not only reducing the time for assessing the same amount of controls, reducing that time for assessing the same amount of controls from hours and hours to 15 minutes. And also significantly increase the efficiency of report generation. As I mentioned, you wait for 24 hours and then you get a report in your S3. You also get an email notification about your report is ready, go here and download it or view it, right? Versus in a manual process, you had to wait for a couple weeks. And lastly, but most importantly, what I want to emphasize here is the self-service nature of Guard. Because as I said, now you're in a driver's seat, you own this product, and as a scanner, it's a tool for you to decide, okay, I want to run it now or I want to run it next week, right? Nothing is really mandated from Amazon to you. So it really helps you kind of self-diagnose and self-assess how you're doing against the policy and where you need to kind of up-level your security standard. We recommend quarterly scanning just, for the sake of, always knowing what's going on in your environment and doing better, but you can really decide yourself. And for the security, for the audit purpose, there is one last question in the command line that asks you, do you want to share the report with Amazon? And for audit purpose, you would want to say yes. And then Amazon and yourself will get the report at the same time, which is 24 hours after the scan. But if you're doing this just for self-assessment, you can just keep the report yourself, keep the findings yourself, and remediate on your own time, and you don't have to share anything with Amazon. So that's the real game changer here, which is the self-service thing, right? You can just do this incrementally and have the option to share with us or not. But if you share with us, we're always happy to provide solution architect support to you. That's kind of one benefit we have. Just real quick, kind of as a sneak peek into the installation experience, it is a CloudFormation template. So you start with filling out the CloudFormation template. It's just email address and a immersion token. Everyone should have that. And then it will set up an EC2 instance, and you will get email confirmation. Then you start going into the CLI. And you enter a few lines of commands, which is, do you want to activate Macy? Do you want to activate Guard Duty? Do you want to start scan? Do you want to share a report with Amazon, et cetera? And that takes, just like 3-4 minutes. And then after that, the scan is done. And you just sit there and wait for 24 hours. Of course, don't sit there and wait for 24 hours, but you wait for 24 hours. Then you get the email notification saying, hey, report is ready. And so Just to let you know, today we had a handful of successful installation in our breakout session. Each of them took about 15 minutes to complete and no issue at all. So, and we had a lot of other developers who already installed it before the summit. So in total, the feedback we've been getting is overwhelmingly positive, especially for those who already gone through audit in the past. They directly saw this comparison and they realized, okay, this is really a positive tool for me to try it out. Lastly, so just a great customer story here. Prista is one of our top 10, I would say maybe number 1 or 2 Japan developer. We met them in Tokyo in April, and they have gone through 2 Deloitte audits in the past 4 years. And while they kind of acknowledge the value of doing that, increasing security standard as a prerequisite of them scaling business, they hoped for a better and streamlined process to do that. So we introduced Guard to them on site, and we helped them install Guard in person. And they were super excited about the outcome of it. And their CTO actually emailed me after that saying, well, we got the report, everything's so easy. And he actually recorded a short video as kind of a customer voice for me, just like to express his excitement because he saw the experience about 2-3 years ago. And now he's like, okay, I love this tool. I want to increase the coverage of this so that we can automate like more of that, maybe 100% in the future. Cool. So with that, I'm going to hand over back to Kevin to talk about architecture framework.
Of course, everyone loves a framework, something for you to follow, best practices with industry experts sharing their guidance. Of course, AWS, we have one around for well-architected framework. One of the pillars is security. Won't go over too in-depth about all the pillars since today's focus is on the data security spotlight. But you can see 7 key design principles here, ranging all the way from the foundational aspects all the way down to application security, which is more recently added, actually. We'll go over these and as well as the best practices around it, some examples, as well as talk to you about how Guard can help you with these, strengthening these pillars as well. An example of Guard, which comprises of a suite of AWS services, like Chenji mentioned, we'll have Macy in there. We'll have Security Hub to aggregate findings. Macy was for identifying PII data. I didn't mention that. But essentially, you can take various AWS services that integrate with Guard, and they'll give you like Chenji said, a posture overview, essentially a health check of your security baseline on your AWS resources. Some of the services, although I know not everybody is on AWS, you can take this diagram here and replace it with a similar service from Azure or GCP. We do have resources out there to share with you as well on other top providers, as well as maybe open source solutions and such. So we'll dive into more of that later. Some of the common misconfigurations from a few of these security pillars range from identity access and management, IAM, flawed detection rules, because we know like in order to respond to an incident, you have to have proper logging and monitoring in place, as well as ranging all the way up from the backbone of your infrastructure, which would be around network protection. There can be various misconfigurations around there as well. But one I would like to highlight as well, because without an incident response plan, it's almost better to have a bad plan and stick with it than to have no plan at all. And one of the key parts of incident response, like I mentioned, is logging and monitoring. So for example, AWS has a CloudTrail service, which will track every API call and all sorts of data plane and management plane incidents. So without this enabled or having it improperly configured, there's no breadcrumbs to follow, as to say. Yeah. A few more examples of incident protection or data protection would be not properly restricting access to storage, whether it be S3 buckets or other forms of storage, ranging all the way down to application security, which I mentioned is more newly added into our practices. But the earlier you bake security into your processes, it's better than to duct tape it on later after an incident or something happens. So secure those pipelines. The cost and complexity, like I just mentioned, is typically lower the sooner you begin with this. There are many best practices in the AWS services we can share. There are dedicated pages in each of the services for this. Again, not everyone will use these services, and we will talk more about other options later. But following these practices and well-architected framework principles will put you in a great starting perspective in baselining your security and advancing it from that point onwards. I know we also mentioned the generative AI and LLM perspective earlier in Anuja's discussion. I just wanted to demonstrate an example of a service we have, Code Guru. We also have Code Whisperer, more newly added recently, and the individual tiers are free. The commercial tier is a lower cost, and it's just a per month, maybe 500 users cost fixed. But you can also utilize that to improve code efficiency, securing your code pipeline, and just to help with the development process. A few of the industry frameworks we already mentioned were the AWS well-architected. OWASP is a great resource as well, the Open Web Application Security Project. They'll have standards for web application security, API security, even LLM security nowadays of all the vulnerabilities around prompt injection and such. So great resources to have. SANS is another great one for identifying, hey, for different cloud providers, what is the equivalent service that will map from, let's say, AWS Macy to an Azure service or GCP service. We're not at the level of integrating Guard to those services yet, but maybe down the line, that is one of our goals. As far as other technical content, we do have data that on our end, lessons learned that we've come across from your collaborative efforts in the audits, as well as other industry trends that influence our content, such as these white papers, technical papers, and blogs, ranging from topics like data encryption all the way down to implementing the Guard itself. So these content pieces can be found at developer.docs.amazon.com/SPAPI. We encourage you to check those out when you have a chance. And ultimately, to wrap this up, the presentation really is just an overview. Security really is a continuous journey, just as threats continually evolve. Your businesses will also grow and scale. And we like to see this as a journey to grow together and collaborate in protecting customer trust. So there you have it.
Well, yeah, thanks, Kevin. I think that transitions into kind of one of the questions we have in mind to determine the applicability of Guard. We would love to understand how many of you are actually running your backend on AWS. And we don't have to go into details about, I use Azure, I use Google, or I use something else. But like we just, in a big picture, we understand how many of you are on AWS, so we can determine how to best kind of improve Guard experience in the future. Because right now it only supports AWS developers. So. Okay, great. I think majority of you are on AWS. So, I mean, we're not here to sell AWS to you, but we're just, trying to understand, how many of you are actually able to or eligible to use Guard. And we'll definitely expand Guard coverage by trying to integrate with other, reports from other cloud service providers or open source certificates or scanners in the future. So thanks for the information. This is really helpful.